All right, welcome. So I'm Juan Banch, SHPE Region 2, Sub-Region 2 Rice Representative, and I'm here with Trevor to basically talk about a little bit about what are the good funding ways to get money and what are the best tips. Please introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Trevor Gomez. I'm the External Vice President for SOLES, which is UCLA's SHPE chapter. And I'm basically the point of contact between the industry and our club, and been relatively successful in gaining some funds. So I'm here to share a little bit about that. A couple big things right off the bat, I would say, are come up with a sponsorship packet. Really represent who your club is, what you are doing for your community, what you're doing for your members, and what you'll do for your sponsors. That's very important to have it all laid out on paper. And beyond that, just be really open to having a phone call with the sponsor, hearing what questions they have about your chapter, about your sponsorship packet, what type of events they're looking for, and being able to negotiate. Maybe a sponsor wants access to your resumes, but they're not ready to sponsor that amount. Talk them through the kind of partnership, and it's because it's not just about your year. It's about continuing that relationship in future years. And that's what really makes it successful, I would say.
Right. And I think one of the things I've heard from you guys and you've mentioned is that you really want to create a relationship. What kind of tips do you have on that end? Sort of broad. We'll dive deeper as we go.
Sure. Number one, deliverables. If you say you're going to give that sponsor something, give them that. Give them their event. Give them your resumes. Really make sure you invite them to your, we have a banquet that we invite all of our sponsors to. And those events where, those things like that are great because you make a personal connection with that person. And so next year, when I pass it on to the next EVP, they already know the person. They have a relationship with me, and I can introduce them to the next person. And then, maybe if that person ends up leaving the company eventually, they put in a good word with you to the next person and they pass it down. And I think, the big question is, how do you start that first relationship, right? And I think alumni are the number one. If you have someone who came from SOLES at UCLA and is now working at company X, by all means say, hey, do you have, access to any sponsorship funds? And if not, do you know someone who can? And almost always they can connect you to someone that you can get on the phone with and talk with sponsorship about more deeply if they can't do it themselves.
Right. That's awesome. Actually, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but do you think you'd want to share screen and share like the sponsorship packet or anything?
Sure. Let me pull that up.
Feel free to pull those up. In the meantime, so you mentioned the alumni, which I think is really important, right? And usually, how do you get in contact with the alumni? Is it like you find them on LinkedIn, or did you have previous contacts already? How would you do that?
Sure. So we really try to keep a list of our alumni, because it's super, it's very important to continually have that relationship, and for reasons like this. A lot of times alumni have connections to the internships that you're looking for, the jobs, or they can talk to their managers and put in a good word about people, our members. And so keeping track of them is very important, but there are definitely other methods like connecting on LinkedIn, using your school's alumni network resources. And really, the more you network, especially as a board member for your chapter, the more likely you are to find someone who you have something in common with, whether that be they went to your school or they were part of a similar organization.
Right, right.
So I have that. I have the sponsorship packet ready to go. So let me share.
Let me just allow you. Okay.
Okay, so this is our sponsorship packet and organizational endeavors, as you can see. So up top, right off the bat, you start with a visual, something that they tie to your organization. And of course, having the SHPE logo. This is just kind of a table of contents, so they know what they're getting into. Here is our contact sheet. So everyone, all of our board members, we have a lot. You have their email here through the organization as well as their personal email. It's just kind of logistical stuff. And of course, social media. We just started our new website, and that's also been a great resource for sponsors, because now they have somewhere where they can go, click around, see what's going on actively. Whereas this sponsorship packet is something that kind of comes out as a big summary. Graphics are huge, especially with nice colors like such. We did some simple things, just who are our members in terms of what year they are and what are their majors. So this is very important to companies because they say, oh, we're maybe not looking for bioengineers, but we are looking for computer science, electrical, and mechanical engineers. So this way they can see with our membership what they're getting, and I can help explain to them why it would be beneficial for them.
And to stop there really quick, do you sort of, I guess there was like really balanced, but are there any things that you do specifically say because you have a large portion of some people?
Sure. So in the past, I would say that a lot of events have been skewed towards either mechanical and like aerospace space, just because there's a lot of that in our area, or computer science. One of my goals this year has been to find events for those bioengineers, those civil engineers, things that we have, sizable percentages of, but maybe not as many events for. So I really want to make it valuable for them as well. And so it's really, kind of spreading your wings and doing a little research. There's always like lists of companies, Fortune 500 companies, big companies in your area. And a lot of times it can be challenging to find a contact for those. But if you talk to your members, you talk to even the SHPE professional chapters, a lot of times you can find someone who's a part of that company and say, hey, I'd like to start forming this relationship. And a lot of times a little bit of networking goes a really long way in that.
And on that one, so it would be more, I guess, if you don't have the alumni on those areas, or you don't have the contacts for those people, it's, as you said, finding someone in the company who's in SHPE and then telling them about what's your goal and then sort of figuring that out.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And a lot of times the best way to share your goals is with this sponsorship packet, I might add. Yeah, so moving forward, we start with what are some things that we do for our members. So this is how we're contributing to each and every one who is a part of SOLES SHPE at UCLA. We talk about a lot of the different events that we do, and this really, companies are interested in this because they see, oh, not only are you preparing your members for the professional world, you're helping them through school. It's, you're showing that you're a valuable organization to your members. And then a great thing that we get into is tech at SOLES, which is basically our technical projects. Companies love to hear about, oh, what hands-on experience are you giving to your student body? And so and for us, it's our website development project. As I mentioned, that's a new development, but it's really exciting. And our SOLES Lunabotics. So that's basically a design and build challenge. And I love to talk about these to companies because they ask, oh, what are some places that our funding would be going? And I'm like, hey, we're doing this super cool project. We can use funding for this specifically. And, this is a really cool way for our
Invaluable
members to get
experience.
experience. Exactly.
Right. And as a quick aside on that one, how did these start at UCLA?
The technical project. So we do have a technical chair, and it was kind of his job to come up with something new for our members to do, because there are a lot of external technical projects that our members were involved with, and we wanted to centralize one that we had for the SHPE body. And so
would you talk about the external ones as well, or
sure,
not so much?
Like
when you talk to,
yeah, when I'm speaking to sponsors, if they ask, what kinds of experiences some of our members have, which is a common question, a lot of times I'll bring up, other clubs and organizations and projects that they're a part of. However, it's not as much going into detail because that's not something that sponsoring our chapter would do. So I really try and, at least if it does come up, bring it around to this project.
Of course. Awesome. And if you don't mind, let's take a quick stop here. All right. Feel free to continue.
Yeah. So the next section of our sponsorship packet is professional development. And this is another great example of what we're doing for our students. However, this is more important to companies, arguably, because it's how we connect with them. So our big one is always SHPE Nationals. We talk about it all the time, and I hope I hope to meet a lot of you at the SHPE virtual convention this year. And so this is something where we talk about, oh, we're sending this many members, and this is actually outdated. We are sending about 50 members this year, so really exciting. But because of that huge number, it's great to speak on, hey, we're sending this many people and it costs this much. We would love it if you could sponsor some of our members to attend. And that's exactly what a lot of the companies would love to do, is really, hey, this is a great opportunity to meet some of the top talent in, within SHPE. And so we're going to sponsor, we're going to give funds so that you can send your members to this convention. So that's really exciting. Beyond that is RLDC, Regional Leadership Development Conference. This section typically isn't this big. However, we are hosting it this year. So that's another huge outreach event for us, as well as the rest of the SHPE Region 2. And this is, just kind of where we speak on that and say, hey, we're hosting it this year, we're doing these things, and we would love to gain a little sponsorship from you to help really push that through. And then this is really the meat and potatoes of what the companies love to see. How can we have company X come to UCLA or meet with us virtually to have an event with them? And so this is, this is pretty small because it's really company to company specific, I would argue. This is one that you really want to talk about in your phone call with the companies. And in my mind, the professional workshops come in 3 different categories. And so the first is your typical info session. The company comes, they tell you about themselves. Maybe they have some members attend, say, hey, this is what it's been like working in our company. This is why you should work for our company. And perhaps they take some resumes or do a little networking at the end. That's the most really robust thing, and it's very easy for companies to put together because they almost always have it. The second category is really more professional development based, and it's really valuable for both the company and the students. So those are typically resume workshops, interviewing workshops, things like that, which you have students who could learn about something and the professionals really teaching it and walking them through it and being open to taking questions and things of the sort. Those are also very successful, just because a lot of times it's very hands-on. And in this virtual world especially, it's more important than ever to really have engagement between our members and the professional representatives. And then finally, we have social like networking events, which in the past have looked like going to the driving range, doing an escape room, having, you know, a networking luncheon with members from a company. And those are more informal, but a great opportunity for students to meet managers, to meet people working there, and really have those one-on-one conversations. So we're really pushing to have things like that in this virtual environment as well.
Awesome. And specifically on that end, as you mentioned, you know, you're selling these things to the company. I guess it's the perfect time to talk about when you're in a phone call with them, how do you negotiate on that end? How do you make it sound like this is amazing and they gotta take it, you know?
Sure. And so it's really driving home. You have to know that you have something valuable to the company. It shouldn't be a one-way conversation where you're like, hey, we need some money, please give us some money. It's really showing what you have to offer and how it can be a mutually beneficial relationship. And so I always kind of come off the bat and say, these are some of the great things that we're doing for our members. This is how we are developing talent, and we would love to share this talent with us if you could share some resources with our chapter. And so it's knowing the value of your chapter, which really is your human capital, if you will. It's because you have valuable members and you're doing valuable things to the community. I'll talk about community outreach next, but these are things that companies really value are, how can we support the community? How can we increase our diversity efforts is another great talking point. And how can we get the talented students to our companies? How can we get their resumes? How can we get them to an interview? And you are the bridge for them. And so, maybe something goes a little dry. If something goes wrong during that phone call, it's okay to be like, I understand where you're coming from, but let's talk about something that we can do together that would be mutually beneficial. And I always bring it back to this workshop is really important, because having a workshop is very important for companies. They want to meet students, they want to shake hands, they want to, get those resumes. And this is really the best way to do it. So you want to ask what they want, but also know what you want. I try to avoid doing a bunch of info sessions in a row just because I feel that that's maybe not as interesting for our members. So it's really making sure you have that two-way conversation and say, this is what I think is valuable. How can we collaborate and make this event as successful as possible?
Awesome.
Sure. So let's get through the rest of this packet. Community outreach, as I mentioned, is great to speak on. If you're doing stuff for your community, the company wants to support that. And so really speaking on, we're helping this many kids in the greater LA area, or whatever area you are in, and this is how your funds could help this event. And you have to be knowledgeable on each and every event that you have on this sponsorship packet, because someone always has a question and it may not be what you're expecting. You know, if someone asks, oh, what's the difference between SHPE Junior Leadership Retreat and Noche and Dia de Ciencias? And you have to know, you know, your funds would be spent differently for this and that, just so that if it comes up, you have the answers, and you can give them a full, complete answer about that. Tutoring is another, you know, this isn't as much of a big singular event. This is something that we do passively throughout the year. And
a question on the previous thing.
Sure.
What did you mention? Yeah, when they ask you some question that you didn't know, you know, is it sort of fine to say, let me check with the people who are in charge of those events and I'll get back to you?
Exactly. So that's a really great point that you bring up. During each and every event, each and every phone call with a sponsor, you should be taking notes on what your deliverables are. So if you say, you know, maybe I'm not sure specifically for this event, let me put you in touch with this person, or let me get that information from the person in charge of that. Perfect. That's something that you should write down and you should make sure you do within a timely manner. Other things as far as writing down, oh, they're looking at these dates for their event. They're looking at this amount and they want to pay in this method. So let me make sure I get them, say, an invoice. All these things are very important. If you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. And so I'm always jotting down notes during my meetings with industry. Okay, so moving on, this recruitment and retention is something that we talk about typically with sponsors, because it's something that shows we are connected as a club. Our members are valuable to us and they're valuable to each other. And these are, again, another area where funds would go to. I don't typically get as many questions about this section, but I feel that it's important to have, just because you're showing that, again, why you're valuable to your members, and that it's not just a bunch of students who are showing up for industry. It's a group of, you know, it's a SHPE chapter and we're all tied together. Really that SHPE familia experience. Okay, so this is really big, is your budget. So this took quite a bit of time to really work out the details for, and this takes involvement from each and every one of your members. And I would say this whole sponsorship packet should be a joint effort between everyone. You don't know, you know, about the outreach events as much as the outreach coordinator. So have them write about it. Have them, you know, highlight the points that they think are really big, but then go ahead and read through it so you know what you're speaking on.
That's actually a great thing. I was gonna ask about that later, but this is something that I remember you guys sat down one evening and everyone worked on it at the same time, right? And I think that's a very effective way to do it.
Oh, totally. To be honest, even though it's kind of my document, I probably wrote about 2 pages of it. And then we had the rest of the board members, like I said, speak on what they are knowledgeable about, and that's their event. Everyone has, you know, a different column or a couple sections here. And so really putting it together. Yeah. So tying that back to the budget, they also know how much they will need for funding. So that's really putting it together here. So this is something where you have to be careful, because you want to not be super overzealous and be like, hey, we're going to spend $100,000 this year. So we need a lot of sponsorship, because that's not as realistic. However, if you need money, you need to get those funds from somewhere. So you have to say, you know, we will be spending maybe half of that. And if you show it itemized as we have here, it makes sense. And so I a lot of times get asked, you know, you're always going to get asked, to be honest, what areas the sponsorship is going towards. And so this is a really great place to come and say, look, community outreach, number one, that's, you know, these are the events that we do. It takes a lot of funding because we're, you know, reaching this many people. Numbers are always great for speaking to the sponsors. And then maybe I come down and say, hey, this is our professional development. This is why this area is important and why we need this much funding. As I mentioned, we're sending a lot of people to SHPE Nationals. So if they ask, this is, you know, this number is even higher now. I'm going to openly speak about that for certain. But yeah, so really having that budget as clear as possible, something where they can go to and see exactly what they're paying for. And finally, we have the sponsorship page. So it's important to put this page at the end because they've read through or at least scanned over all of the good things about your group. And they know maybe like where their money will be going, and they know that it's valuable for them to sponsor you. And so here is where you get to what can you do for the company. And as you can see, we have our different sponsorship levels here. With gold, you're giving them the most deliverables, down to bronze, where you're just giving them maybe an info session. And so really working this out is important, but also being open to negotiating this area. Everyone wants resumes. So where's your cutoff? For us, we put it at $1,000 for access to our resume book. You'll always have people in the bronze range asking about student resumes, and you're like, okay, how can we negotiate this? What can we trade here with here? Or how can we have you help us with another event so that we can, you know, call it even, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's also being open to, if it's a new company that you're just forming a relationship with, maybe it's more valuable to give them your resumes and have them return next year, as opposed to you turn them down, you do one event this year, and then you kind of lose that connection. So, you know, it's that relationship building, as we've touched on. So that this is the slide that you definitely have to know black and white. If you say, okay, what are we getting if we give X amount of dollars? And you're like, okay, this is in this, you're in the gold, you're in the silver, these are what we're giving you. And then, of course, it's delivering on all of these things. So like publication of available job and internship openings in our weekly emails. A lot of companies will send out new internship availabilities, and we have a weekly newsletter, which we put that in. Although, you know, sometimes you have to reach out and say, hey, it's been a while since we've touched base, just checking in. Is there anything that you would like in our newsletter? And that shows that you care. It shows that you're keeping track of who your sponsors are and that you really value them as much as they, you know, have given to your company or given to your chapter.
Right. And one final question here, when you mentioned, you know, they sort of always want the resumes, that's something you use as a tool to negotiate. Are there any other big ones that you use? Or is that the main one?
Resumes are definitely the one that's asked about the most. I'd say second is those scholarships. Companies love to have scholarships in their name, especially as like a tax write-off. And that's something you just have to be aware of. And so be open to talking about it, but also be able to say no. If a company is giving, $200 and they want access to the student resumes, or they're giving, $800 and they want a $500 scholarship, that's not very beneficial to your chapter. And so being able to say, I think it's just saying no perhaps isn't the best way to put it, but you rephrase it and put a positive spin on it. I think it would be better allocated in this way. Or perhaps in the future, we can work towards something, or maybe we do an event where you'll have access to some student resumes, but not the entire resume book. So really thinking on your feet, because companies always have different questions, different wants, and different requirements. And so being able to, take the curveball, put a positive spin on it, and convey your chapter's needs and how can we connect that with the company's needs is really important.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. This is great. If you want to continue to sort of the example emails.
Sure.
Feel free to do that.
So this is a great example of my first communication to a company. So number one, who are the recipients? These are people who we've worked with before, and these are indeed alums from UCLA, UCLA's SHPE chapter specifically. So we keep a database of all our contacts, and I reach out to them. It's good to know them on a personal level, so always address them by their full name during that first email. This next bit, introducing myself, just a little informal. I hope this email finds you well. This is who I am. This is something that connects a name to a face. So last year's external vice president worked with these people. And so I'm saying, hey, I'm basically his, apprentice. I'm following up in his footsteps. So this is something that they make the connection. Hey, we had a good experience with this person in the past. So let's continue that. And this is, I would love to continue that relationship with you. And that's exactly what we are pushing towards, is building that relationship and, keeping a good thing going in this case. Perhaps if it's a new company, I say, I got your contact info through this. And I'd love to talk about building a brand new relationship between your company and my chapter. And then you always want to have a call to action. And for the goal of this initial email is to get on a phone call with these people. Email chains are great for, conveying information, but if you really want to talk through the sponsorship packet and, talk about why they should sponsor you, it's always better to do it over a phone call or a Zoom call. Is perhaps even better because you can screen share and have the face-to-face. And so in that phone call, you're going to talk about potential collaboration, and then you talk about some of the things that they will give you, or you can give them for your events. And finally, always make sure you kind of push them. I hope to hear back from you. This is something that's kind of cool, the signature. So you have, your insignia, and then you make it look professional. However, in follow-up emails, this can take up a lot of space and kind of get messy. If with the reply chains, there's a lot going on. So I typically try and send this only for the first email, although I'm more than guilty of accidentally sending it. And of course, attach your sponsorship packet, which you've worked so hard on. Give them something to look at, and that's a great thing. It's always a great conversation starter once you hop on that phone call. So in this case, I did not get a response, and so send a follow-up. My rule for follow-ups is usually I try and wait 2 weeks if I haven't heard anything. However, if it's more urgent, 2-3 days. But in this case, this was the initial email, and I said, hey, I sent this email on, I don't know, maybe it was during the weekend. So let me send it during the week. And that's a big one. Try not to send stuff during the weekend. I highly recommend using schedule send, which sends it at 8 a.m. on Monday. So it's the first thing in their email box, but it hasn't, gotten lost with other emails from the weekend, perhaps. So in this case, I kind of reiterated that I wanted to have a meeting with them. And in this case, they got back to me and they said, all right, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for following up. And these are some great meeting times. So don't be afraid to say, these are some times that I can meet. A lot of times they'll say, we'll meet in this way, and offer multiple methods for you to meet with them. Phone call, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. A lot of times companies have, specific things that they use. So just be open to having the meeting. And so, talking about, this is just kind of an email chain, setting up that initial call and sending that follow-up email. So I guess in this case, our conversation got cut short. So I said apologies for that. Do you have any further questions? And so I usually try and send my follow-up email within a day of that phone call. And that's just because, okay, these are the things that we talked about. Here are some of the deliverables that I promised on my end. Let me get those to you. Or I need a little time to gain some information and get that to you is, another perfectly acceptable situation. And, really just saying this conversation was important to me. This is what I took away from it. And I hope you took away the same. So, these are the rest of these emails are setting up a specific event. So, but I feel that this is a good example of a, collaboration. Don't be afraid to send out that first email and to follow up if they don't, if you don't hear back. In this case, it worked out very well. And we actually have an event with this company this Thursday. So obviously it worked out well. Another thing that I've added this year to our sponsorship tracking is our commitment form, but I want to stop and see if you had any questions about those.
Yes. One quick question was just that sort of, could you talk in brief how a phone call goes? Is it introductions at the beginning, then you tell them, let's go through the packet together, or how do you set it up?
Yeah, so always start with introductions. I asked them about themselves, how long have they been with the company? A lot of times if they've been a part of SHPE, talk about that a little bit, talk about, what you have in common. And I think I use like the same introduction every time. And so for me, that is, hello, my name is Trevor Gomez. I'm the external vice president for the Society of Latino Engineers. I'm a third-year mechanical engineering major. And then I talk about, I joined SOLES SHPE as soon as I got to UCLA and have, gained nothing but community outreach, professional development, academic development opportunities, all while, being connected with companies like yours. And so because it's benefited me so much, this year I've taken on the role as the point of contact between industry. So I can really make sure, we continue doing so for our students, or for our student body. And they love that. You know, it's a very anecdotal, this has worked for me, and they love to hear that. And then it's typically, well, so let them drive the conversation. If they have questions, if they have specific things they want to touch on, let them get that out of the way. But they may not always. So I love touching on the sponsorship packet. Hey, did you get a chance to look through it? If not, let's take a look right now. And if so, do you have any questions about it? And they'll always have questions, something they want to talk about.
Right.
Then it's usually setting up, or at least discussing what kind of events you would want to do with the company. So talking through what are some options that we have. I think this would be good. I think this date would be good. And a lot of times they'll counter. So just be, like I said, able to think on your feet. Don't be afraid to say, that might not work out. Let's try something else.
Awesome.
And then towards the end, it's really talking about the sponsorship levels. You know, I think this event will be great. This is what your money would be going towards. Let's talk about how much, how, you know, in what format are we doing it? You know, we'd love to have you on board and have us, have you be a partner for us. So let's talk sponsorship is kind of how I usually get to it.
Yeah, that's great. That was really good. I see it sort of like the best way is obviously if they want to drive it, you got to let them and they get the questions answered. And if not, always have that idea of let's go through the packet.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, keep going.
And then a final note, try and keep it to about 30 minutes. If you have a really talkative point of contact, you know, obviously great. Those are usually some of the best, you know, best events you'll set up because you're like, okay, let's really talk through it. And that's fine. But you also don't want to cut it too short. If it's someone who's maybe not as talkative, you want to make sure, you know, you feel that their time is valuable. Yeah. So the next thing I'm going to share is our commitment form, which I mentioned. So this is something where while the sponsorship is being processed, or even before, you know, they start sending the check or the wire transfer, that sort of thing, you want to make sure you have it in writing. Okay, X company is going to sponsor this amount of dollars. And so I kept this really simple with the company name, the amount, the purpose. A lot of times this is just to talk about, oh, we're doing this event on this date. Method of payment. I'll touch on that in a little bit. Some companies require an invoice. That's pretty school specific. So I won't go into the nitty gritty of that, but a lot of times they'll require an invoice and even a W-9. So make sure you work with your school, you know, kind of your funding point of contact to make sure you have these things. And finally, you have signature and date. So this is great. You know, keep this in a database once they sign it, just so you have it on hand, you know, later on down the road. I wouldn't say that companies try and say, oh, you know, we weren't going to sponsor that much or anything. It's just good to have that formal agreement. This kind of seals the deal. And so method of payment, UCLA typically allows sponsorship through checks and through wire transfers. And so as we're getting into, you know, the more virtual age, it's becoming more and more important to be able to pay through credit cards. And so that is something that we have set up through UCLA. That took quite a bit of time, so really look into it. But it is a great option. And it's as simple as this website here. So UCLA kind of helps us set this up. They can, a sponsor can come through and click and, go through this process and really pay through credit card. So that's a really great option to have, simply because if, sometimes they can't sponsor through a check, or getting an invoice or wire transfer is a whole process. This makes it quick. So really just keeping your options open. And credit card is a great way for that.
That makes sense. I remember hearing that about you guys, like some people couldn't because you guys didn't have this set up. So definitely having the options open.
The one thing I would say, for back when we could not take sponsorship through credit cards, another great option, which may not come to mind right offhand, is let's have you purchase something with your credit card for our club. And so that's another good option that you might not think of, and they might not think of, but is another perfectly valid sponsorship, especially if it's something that you were going to purchase with club funding in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, I think this pretty much wraps it up. And honestly, thank you so much. Really, really good detail on everything that you touched upon. Anything you had to say at the end, or anything left over?
I think we touched on just about everything. But if there are further questions, I'm in that SHPE Region 2 Slack, so feel free to message. Yeah, good luck.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have a great rest of your day, Trevor.
Thank you. Bye-bye.